We'll call this regular city council meeting to order on October 21st, 2024 at 6 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mr. Eimer. Present. Mr. Bateman.
Present.
Mr. Sanders.
Present.
Mrs. McCullen.
Present.
Mr. Parrott.
Present.
Mr. Downs.
Present.
Mrs. Ross.
Present.
Mrs. O'Donoghue.
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. This evening, to start public participation, I've asked Soren Allcamp to come in and share with the council the project with the painted parking blocks. You might have seen them as you were coming into the building. And so, Soren, if you want to step forward and share details about the project, we'd appreciate it. And I've got your presentation up here.
Perfect.
You just want to walk me through it?
Yeah, so I'd like to start off by saying thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this as my project. It's been a great help with your financial aid. Let's see, first we got the blocks from Walt. We got them all set and ready to be painted. We power washed them off so all the oils and stuff would get off the block and be ready to be primed. So if you'll click the next one, that's my brother there. He's priming the blocks with primer brought from the local Sherman-Williams. Yeah, go ahead. And there's all of them primed. And so after they were primed, the local Boy Scout troop and I we all started painting the blocks with different designs. So that one there's watermelon, and go to the next one. Oh, and there's a picture of us. We were doing it at nighttime. We were tracing on the lines. We used a projector to do that. That way we could see it better. Or go ahead. So there's back in the daytime. There's what the sign started to look like as we were painting it. All right. Yep. And there's we had some canopies up. We had a bunch of boys out there painting the blocks. Go ahead. And yep, there's another picture. On all the backside of the blocks, we have watermelons. There's another picture of that's the Route 66 block. There we have a cornfield with butterflies. And yeah, there's a picture of all the blocks finished, painted. Yep.
So some of the blocks are actually put in place already at the parklets downtown. You might have already seen them down there. Walt, where else are they located?
They're located there on Pulaski Street for the arcade and Spirited, and then down at the Alibi.
Okay. Questions for Soren?
Yeah,
Mr.
thank
Parrott?
you. They look great. I really appreciate that. And just how much more time, Walt, will we have with these blocks out with the parklet?
That time frame ends October 31st.
Over 31st. So if you get a chance to come down and come see it before we put them away.
Mr. Eimer?
How old are you, young man?
I'm 17.
Okay, well, you're a credit to your age, and hopefully a lot of the local students that you go to school with are observing this. Fantastic job.
Thank you.
And pat on the back from here, so great job.
Yeah, it was actually a great alternative to the original concept of the project with the viaduct. So thank you for not giving up on the project and doing something for us. Anybody else? Questions, comments?
Congratulations, great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. And how much role did your dad have in this?
He had a bunch. We painted him out of his place, so.
Good. Just had to give you a little credit there, Brett. Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, Soren, thank you for taking time to come tonight and share the project.
Does this complete your Eagles?
So this is the project. All I have left to do now is a board of review, so that's where they ask me questions about my qualifications for being an Eagle Scout, but this was pretty much the final step. So,
Great.
Well, good luck.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hey, Brett, hold on. Hey, Brett, let me give you your. Okay. All right. Is there anybody else that would like to speak under public participation this evening? Okay, for the record, there is no additional public participation. We will start with the consent agenda this evening. It starts with 5A, payment of bills. 5B, approval of minutes, October 7th, 2024, regular city council meeting. 5C, approval of request from Don Seeloff to permit the closing of 10th Street from Union Street to Chestnut Street on Thursday, October 31st, 2024, from 5 p.m. until 8 p.m. for Halloween night. And 5D, approval of request from Lincoln Christian Church to permit the closing of North McLean Street between Pekin Street and Delavan Street on Friday, December 6th, 2024, from 3 p.m. until 8 p.m. for the Lincoln Christian Church Hometown Christian Carriage Rides.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Alderman Downs made the motion. Alderwoman Rolfs second. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Eimer?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullen?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Okay, next item up is item 6A, resolution approving the content of certain executive session meeting minutes of the City Council of the City of Lincoln. Alderwoman McClellan made the motion. Alderwoman O'Donohue second. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. O'Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Eimer?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullen?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mrs. Ross?
Yes.
Okay, next item up is item 6B, ordinance to create 1-6-10 of the Lincoln City Code, which was tabled October 7th, 2024. Would the council like to keep this item on the table or remove the item from the table?
I'd like to make a motion to remove it.
Okay? Remove it from the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Alderman Eimer made the motion to remove from the table. Alderman Downs second. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mrs. Ross?
No.
Mrs. O'Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Eimer?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullen?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Okay. Further discussion on this item? Is there a motion to approve or remove from the agenda?
Make a motion to remove it from the agenda.
Is there a second? Okay. Is there a motion to approve? Okay.
Make a motion to approve.
Alderman Bateman made the motion. Is there a second? Okay.
Second.
Okay. Alderman Sanders, second. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Could I ask, let me discuss a little bit. John,
Sure.
are we comfortable with this?
Well, the comments I got last time, I asked to table it. You guys have tabled it. The changes are still being implemented, but if you guys want to progress with what's there already, you're well within your right to do as such.
So if we voted, so we could vote to approve what's there already and then come back and make changes.
Correct, yes.
Alderman Eimer.
The way this was written, it's weaponized. This is not good. You talk about ethics, and this is nothing ethical about the way that was written. So, yeah, I think you're open the future for lawsuits. So I don't think it's a good idea.
Alderwoman O'Donohue.
Do we have a list of the updates or anything new that was added to it?
Nothing has been added to it at this point. I thought I was going to have a little bit more time to do it because I got some additional edit requests over the course since the last period of time. So again, what's there already, I believe, is a good base for it to work on if you guys want to proceed forward on it today. But we could always make changes to it at a later point in time.
Alderman Downs.
I don't know. I'm torn. I mean, I think we need ethics. I think it's a good policy, but I kind of feel like John's not comfortable with it, so makes me a little not comfortable as well. I don't want to approve of something that could potentially put us in litigation or anything either. So I'm a little hesitant about it, I guess.
Alderman Eimer and then Mr. Hoblet.
You know, I've talked to past aldermen, and they said this is absolutely absurd the way it's written. You're targeting certain people. I mean, this is a very slippery slope. I guarantee if it's used ways that it's written, there's going to be litigation off of it. So, you know, I'm on a definite no vote. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't have some ethics, but the way this is written, fining people and stuff like that, and you can just pick and choose who you want to go after, that's absolutely wrong. So that's my opinion.
Mr. Hoblet.
I mean, I don't believe with the way it's written, it would result in litigation. It would only be it's about ethics and holding the elected officials to said ethics. And if the elected officials believe that being held to said ethics would result in a lawsuit, I feel like they're being targeted. It's about the elected officials, not just one or two.
Alderwoman Rolfs.
I haven't reviewed this since last week, but from what I can remember, a lot of the codes that I went through, they would have a tenet. This is what we want. Underneath that, they would have a guideline. I was concerned about the one that said something about 10 days of unexcused absence. There was nothing that explained what an unexcused absence was or who had the power to issue that unexcused absence. And so the codes that I read where they said what the tenet was, this is what we want, but this is how we get there. And I think that when you are asking, if we're still looking at this, the rest of us making a decision with regard to whether or not that person, I want a guideline. I want something that tells me. I would hope that the next council after, maybe we're all gone, if they're still using that ethic, if it's very good, which it should be, then they have what they need to make those decisions appropriately.
Alderwoman O'Donoghue and then Alderman Eimer.
So for me, when we started talking about this, it's not targeting of anybody. It started out being a tool just to keep everybody in check. I mean, there's things that happen that put the city at a liability from a standpoint of being out in the public, doing things, saying things. We are aldermen, and we should be held to a higher standard than anybody else in the community. I mean, we're elected officials. I don't think it's wrong. I mean, if you don't like the wording of it, that's fine. Then table it again and somebody start working on it. But I think it's to keep the city from getting into a lawsuit as opposed to having something there for the alderman to be then suing the city for. And as for 10 days, I mean, we are elected officials. If you can't be here when you're supposed to be here, because you're on vacation or you're gone or you just didn't feel like coming in today, then that's an issue too. I mean, the people put us here to do a job and we should be here. I mean, 10 days isn't a big ask for you not to miss 10 meetings in a year. So, I mean, table it if you want to table it, but I think it still needs to be worked on, and it's something that we need to do. I mean, we're not any better than anybody else.
Alderman Eimer.
Well, I disagree because it is targeting. And when you sit there and say showing up to job sites, I'm the only alderman, and I'll come right out and say it, that has showed up to a job site. People, let me tell you something. The aldermen of the past went to the job sites. There was none of this to where you can't go to a job site if you got a question or whatever. Now, I'm not saying you go out there and interfere with the work, but when constituents call you to come out to a site because they got a problem, and now that's an issue, and who is anyone up here got the authority to issue somebody a $500 fine, which we can't even impose half the fines down here at City Hall anyway, and then the last thing says, then if you don't pay the fine, you can be removed. Now you're taking the people's vote away. You got to be kidding me. Now that is just absurd. And you call that ethics?
Is it because you're,
I'm
is
talking.
it because
Hold
you're
on,
better
I'm
than
talking. Let
everybody
me
else?
finish. Let me finish. Now I'm not saying that we shouldn't be held to some kind of standard. I get that, but the way this is worded is absolutely insane. And maybe some of you should rethink of why you're an alderman and what your jobs are and what you should be doing, and maybe you should go talk to some of these past aldermen, because the ones I've talked to that said up here, very prominent ones, said this is actually absolutely crazy, the way this is. So you guys do what you want, but I am voting no.
Alderman Bateman.
So far, the only question that came up of any of the topics, other than what Mr. Eimer just went on about, was unexcused absence. Quite honestly, that's extremely simple. Unexcused is, we're all sitting here wanting to know where you're at. The mayor don't know. Nobody knows. That's unexcused. If you're going to be absent from a meeting, it's simply sending an email to the mayor or the city clerk or the treasurer or the alderman sitting next to you or whatever, that you're not going to be there. To me, that could be, you could get sick at work and it may be 10, 15 minutes before the meeting, as long as you let somebody know. There has been meetings since I've been sitting up here that we did wonder where aldermen were and are we waiting, you know, are they delayed or whatever, only to find out they were just doing something else later and didn't let anybody know. To me, that's an unexcused absence. It works in the workplace, it works at school, it doesn't, that's the simplest thing that we could fix. I don't have a problem with any of the other things. I think we all should be held accountable to the standards that we have, and, you know, visiting a job site is that's not asked of an alderman. It's how you visit the job site that becomes the problem. So I don't have a problem with it, and I think it's long overdue.
Alderwoman McClellan.
I believe it can be reworked a little bit. I would prefer to have someone sit down and rework some of the wording of some things that are in there. I'm not totally comfortable with the way it's worded right now.
Alderman Downs.
Are you suggesting we put it back on the table, Robin? I'll make a motion to put it back on the table. If I kind of feel a little the same way you are.
Right. I am wondering if, yeah, I guess back on the table would be the best thing, but I'm really wondering if we can, I know there's a committee, maybe discuss it in committee again or something, or if that means put it back on the table. I'm just wondering how much actually we can put in a document like this. So there's some restrictions according to things like the Constitution, you know, that kind of need to be talked about. So in my opinion, so.
Alderwoman Ross.
This would be a question for the city attorney. If it was felt by many people that some of the wording needs to be checked and make sure that we are, I mean, I still like having a guideline along with it, because I think it does help people say, this is the way it is. It doesn't necessarily say, you know, you're interpreting this incorrectly. People can't do that at that point. But what would be the appropriate procedure? Is it putting it back on the table, voting it down, sending it back to committee when you vote it down? What would be the correct procedure to do that?
Well, I don't believe when ordinances and resolutions of this nature come before the council, there should be some sort of sense of finality to them. At least in my opinion. Now, of course, you can vote down an ordinance, and I suppose technically you could bring it right back up again the next meeting, but that kind of sends mixed messaging, because you have one instance where a council says no, and another instance it later says yes. There should be some sort of sense of finality to an ordinance, to where if it's voted down, it's not brought back for quite some time. That way, it kind of deters just constantly bringing up the same issue over and over and over again until you badger the council to say yes to it. So, in my opinion, you should probably table it, probably set it, you know, as an actual agenda item on the next COW, you know, as opposed to just not talking about it and now talking about it again at the next voting meeting. So that would probably be a recommendation from me. But there's also nothing to stop you, I suppose, technically from voting it down and bringing it back up at a later date. But that's my respective opinion.
Alderman Eimer.
You know, I've been retired employee now, 3 years. I've been involved with the city, either retired or employed for 25 years now. And I've seen how rules, how it's been, we'll pick and choose on who's going to follow what. And this has really opened the door of how we're going to pick and choose how rules or certain guidelines are going to be done. So, you know, the old saying goes, if you can't stand some heat, then don't be in the kitchen. I mean, if you can't stand healthy debates or whatever like that, and I'm not saying you get up here and get nasty with people. I'm not saying that at all. So, no, we shouldn't. But, you know, who is anybody up here got the right to take the people's vote away? I mean, the people voted us in. And now all of a sudden we get 3 or 4 going, we don't like that person. Now we're going to get rid of them. Or we're going to find them or whatever. That's exactly how this can be used. And that's how this is supposed to work? I don't think so. That's not democracy at all.
Alderman Parrott?
So whether we approve this or a version of this, does a council have the ability, John, to censure anyone?
Oh, yes. So,
Can you explain that, please?
so as of right now, the council does have certain abilities to them. You don't need an ordinance or a resolution to do what you're proposing to do. They're still within the purview of the council to censure someone if you feel like they believed, if there's an elected official they believe has acted in a manner unbefitting of an elected official. And these do not need to be, to feel like they need to be put in place first before you could do that is not exactly, it's not accurate at all. Okay. So you can censure somebody, and the way censure works is it's in essence, it's pretty much, it's a public shaming, you know, of an alderman, that if you believe an alderman has acted in not in good confidence, acting in a manner that's unbefitting, that has reflect poorly upon the city council, and censure is not usually utilized. It would operate as a resolution. You would ask me to outline exactly what the infractions were. It would be at a vote. It would be listed on the agenda. You'd come before the council as a voting item, and it would be voted upon. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, what does that realistically do to a council member? Well, that doesn't really, it doesn't stop the council member from being a council member. They will still come. They will still vote. They could still go into executive session. They could still do everything you can. But it is a tool for the council to utilize, to in essence send to the public that you do not approve of their actions. And it's especially useful tool if you believe that the actions of an alderman or alderwoman are going to one day result in litigation, like say from city workers, any city workers against the city or against any members of the public against the city for the actions, the derelict actions of an alderman or alderwoman. You would want to do everything that you can as affirmative defenses in your power to try to say that we did everything we could to curtail this type of activity. Okay, there are things like censure, a cease and desist letter. Those are options that are present before the council already at this point, right now. Okay, to utilize though in the event that they feel it's necessary. So that's what those are, Mr. Parrott.
Alderman Eimer?
Okay, so if that's the case, what John just said, then we have something in place. Why do we need this? Why don't we let that go for a while? Nobody's done anything so wrong that we even need to have this. Nobody. So why don't we get to that point? You know, why don't we, he just sat there and said people could be censored or whatever. So why don't we do that? Instead of, you know, fining somebody $500? How'd you like to be fined $500, any one of you? Just because someone said that's what we're going to do. And you're arguing your case that you didn't do nothing wrong. What if you're innocent? What if you're innocent and they fine you $500? You say, I ain't paying that. And they say, well, you're removed, because that's what the last little line there says. You think that's right? You think that's right? Take away the people's vote? People voted us in here. If they don't want us here, they'll vote us out. If we get censored, you don't think that ain't gonna go out in the public and do something? They'll get you out. That's the way this town works. I think we have enough in place. We've never had an issue where we've censored somebody, have we? See? So why are we doing this? Because it's already targeted one person up here already. It's right there in black and white. Right there in black and white, folks.
Just to follow up
Alderman
on this,
Barrett.
on the censure, does it go into executive session first to discuss, like, for personnel, or is it just discussed in public at first? How does that work?
You can go and discuss it in executive session. It probably would not be under 2C1. It would be under 2C3 for elected officials and disciplinary. So that would, if you want to have that conversation, an exec session, you certainly can, but we would have to come out of it and list, the actual censure itself as a voting item. It has to be voted on in a public setting.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I believe Alderman Downs made a motion to table.
I'm making right now a motion.
I'm
to
not,
table.
no, I am not suggesting you do. I thought I heard you during Ms. McClellan's.
I brought it up, but I didn't
Conversation.
formally make
Okay.
it. I'll make it now, though. I'll make a motion to table.
Okay, but for the record, I was not suggesting you table
I know
this
you weren't.
item.
You're good. I know
I
you
was,
weren't.
I was simply, I thought I had heard that.
You're fine.
Okay. Any discussion on tabling this item? Roll call to table this item.
Mrs. McCollum,
Yes.
Mr. Parrott,
Yes.
Mr. Downs,
Yes.
Mrs. Ross,
No.
Mrs. O'Donahue,
No.
Mr. Eimer,
No.
Mr. Bateman,
No.
Mr. Sanders.
No.
Okay, what was the? 5-3 to not table, correct?
Motion
Okay.
to pass as read.
Second.
Okay. So I believe we already had a motion.
Yeah, but we can't go back.
I'll defer to the attorney so we do this the proper way. So Mr. Bateman made an additional motion and Mr. Sanders seconded that. Is that appropriate at this point after we've voted not to table?
I believe we're at the motion to approve section phase at this point.
Well,
We brought it off the table.
Correct.
right. And then Mr. Bateman made the motion, Mr. Sanders seconded it to vote on it, and then we just did the table it again.
Mm-hmm.
So now Mr. Bateman wants to make another motion to vote on it, so go for that or go back to the original one where he motioned it.
We can, I would
do
proceed
it
to
again.
vote. Yeah.
That's a mistake.
Well, the vote now is
Put it in place.
to put what is in that document in place.
Correct. Ms. McClellan and then Mr. Eimer.
I really believe this could be used as a witch hunt, and I believe that we have to be very, very careful when we're talking about removing anybody from office that the people that voted us into office voted in. I think that we have to, I know I sent a letter to our attorney citing that we had two recourses. One was to do what? Censor. And so there were two recourses. I believe the Constitution guarantees a right. I don't know about, I'll be honest, I'm not, I've never seen an ethics committee other than maybe on the national news that would try to remove somebody from office. But any ethics, I have not seen anything comparable in any other ethics document that I have seen anywhere. So I'm just reinforcing that I think it would be better to rework the wording of the document.
Alderman Eimer.
You aldermen want to follow Mr. Bateman and vote like that, that's your choice, but this is a terrible idea. This is terrible. The people voted us in here. We have something in place. We do not need this. We have never needed this. We have never used this. It's already been weaponized already. And anybody sits up here tonight that follows Mr. Bateman and votes yes for this, I hope the constituents are watching. I really do.
Alderwoman Rolfs.
If the vote comes back no, we still have the censure, cease and desist options. Is
I
that
defer to
what
the
you were
attorney.
saying?
Yes. You've already, every council everywhere has had those options available to them since time immemorial.
Alderman Parrott.
So with this code here that we have, so let's say there was an individual, an alderman that went out to a work site or whatever that was causing issues. How do we get to a vote of removal or fining? How does that work, John? I mean, what's the process of the people hear that as well?
I would presume that there would be an investigation done
Who investigates?
by that commission, that respective commission. And that commission would give a recommendation to the council, and the council can move on from there.
And so if we were to censure and use that process, how does that work? Who brings that to the council for discussion for
Any one of you can bring that to the council for discussion. You would ask me to, either we would discuss in, an exec session, and then coming out of exec session, you would direct me to create a document for censure. And then you would tell me exactly what you want to put in that. It would be phrased similar to a resolution, and to where I would bring that before as an agenda item for the council.
So really, a censure really takes a step out of the process because you're not going before a committee. You're just
Correct.
going right to the council.
Correct.
Alderman Eimer.
I mean, to vote for this is just absolutely absurd. I just can't even believe we're still discussing this. I mean, how anybody up here, it just blows my mind how anybody could come up here and say, we're going to fine somebody $500. I mean, that is just great. I don't even know, is that even constitutional to do that? I mean, and then to turn around, the people voted us in here. And now 4 or 5 of you want to say, well, we don't like you and we want you out. Now, if there's something pretty serious that goes on and you bringing it through the censure and all that, I don't think there's going to be a problem dealing with it that way. But this is an open door policy to pick and choose. They've already showed they weaponized it already. They've already showed it. It's right there, folks, black and white. Proven. So you vote how you want, but I think this is a serious mistake. And past aldermen that I've talked to, very prominent ones, have said it is very terrible, and they're highly upset over it, said it should not be. So that's where I'm at.
Alderman Bateman.
The problem I have with a censure is what John said. It's just nothing but a public shaming. You could be censured every single week, the entire time you sit here, and we're supposed to sit here and take it. I mean, the reason for the ethics thing is obviously if you're unethical about things, which I don't think anything in that document is way overreaching on asking for a behavioral out in public or on a job site or with other employees. A censure, in my opinion, is nothing but what John said. It's just nothing but a public shaming. You could technically be censured every single meeting all the time and just sit here and just, okay, I'm censured, and walk out the door and keep doing the same thing. There's no repercussions for the actions. And that's what this document does. It actually gives repercussions for documents. If you sit here and think that the first offense that you're going to find 7 of your peers to vote you out, I think is a little ridiculous. But, if there has to be some kind of repercussion. It just can't just be, hey, quit doing it again, shake your finger at them, and you just walk out and do the same thing over and over again. That's how we got to this point, is because it's becoming an issue.
Alderman Eimer and then Alderwoman McClellan.
Because there has not even been an issue. There has been no past members that needed this, and there is currently no members up here that need this. So how he can sit there and make that statement is completely absurd. There is nobody that needs any of this. Nobody. Am I wrong? I mean, who's needing this?
Alderwoman McClellan.
I believe the city attorney said something about a cease and desist also. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So that would be another thing besides the censure that could be used. If
The councils, cities in the past have had to get, in the past, cease and desist, and if they violate the cease and desist, to essentially get a stalking no contact order against that respective alderman, saying that they then get a court order that they cannot show up or do whatever or do what they've been doing. And then if they violate that, then it would be a criminal prosecution at that point in time.
Alderman Downs.
I do think that this is needed. I'm just one vote, but I don't think it's targeted. I do think in the past that there has been issues where we have needed this. So
Name it.
no,
Why would you, then how?
because I'm not gonna call somebody out. It's nobody here. If that makes you feel any better, but I mean it's I'm not gonna call anybody out and do that.
There's an alderman that needed this.
Yes. You can disagree. That's fine.
Alderman Sanders.
This passing this ethics codes gets the city of Lincoln up into the 21st century. Most municipalities have a code of ethics that their aldermen follow. And quite frankly, some of this stuff is quite mild to some of the stuff that you see in other states.
Ms. Bateman.
No matter if the council passes this or not, if it's passed, hopefully everybody's an adult. You run as an elected official, you should be an adult. So if that's the case, you wouldn't have to worry about F and G on this item. It wouldn't, if we're all adults and you keep sometimes you got to keep your opinion to yourself and not be rude to people, you won't have to worry about F and G. That's all I have to say.
Well, you're absolutely
Mr.
right,
Eimer.
but I agree to that to a point. But this council's already proved that they can target somebody, so I've seen it. So there's just no way. I've got nothing to hide. So, but this is they've proved that when people stand up and stand out for the will of the people, that they don't like it, then things are said and done, or even behind closed doors up here. So. This is absolutely insane in my opinion. There is nobody that has needed this in the past. I disagree with Mr. Downs on that statement. We have something in place already with the censure part, and I could argue this all night long as far as that goes, because this can be finding somebody. How can any of you find somebody? That is just crazy. Think about what you're saying. You have no authorization to find anybody. None of you. Me included. None of us. And then if you don't pay the fine, you're gone? Now who are any of us to do that? That is bizarre. And as far as this about I looked up Decatur's. They don't have nothing like this. Nothing. And what other states do, we're not in other states. We're in Illinois. So Decatur's ain't nothing like this. But they have one? Yes, they have nothing. It's nothing worded like this. They have something, but it's nothing worded like this.
Okay.
So
Okay. Let's.
If we're going to amend it, I would say we amend it and then you vote on it. But to vote it in and put it in and then you go back and amend it, that's completely wrong.
Well, that was actually going to be my suggestion. Is there are some points in this document that seem to be a concern to some council members. You're well within your right to make a motion to amend, but you make sure you're specific which ones you're asking the council to consider with you. And you don't have to do that now. We got a few people want to talk. Mr. Conzo.
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't going to comment on this at all, but it does include me and includes the mayor, includes the city clerk, so I will comment on it. But in a larger sense, I think what Alderwoman McClellan said is completely accurate, and I think you should listen to what she said. And that this can be weaponized in not by anybody here necessarily, but we've had people, I've been up here a long time, some people think too long, but I've been up here a long time, and I've seen people come and go, and there have been people within this body who given the opportunity and given the tools to do it, would weaponize it and use it to the detriment of the council and to the detriment of the city as a whole. And so, if I had to vote on it, I would vote against it as it's worded now. And I think many of the points that Alderwoman McClellan made, even though she didn't talk for any great length of time about it, but I think the points that she made were 100% accurate.
Okay, Mr. Parrott and then Ms. Rolfs.
Yeah, I was just going to go back to E. I'm not for sure exactly how this would work. What type of proof would you need? I mean, whose word do you take as far as, let's say, a department head versus maybe an alderman? And then how is that? What proof would this body need? How would that work exactly, John? I mean, is this like a court of law? That would be brought forth. How does that work?
So E is in regards to,
There's an allegation that the workflow stopped because of an elected official.
I suppose they would do an investigation of
Now,
the people.
who's they?
The commission.
The commission.
Yeah, would do an investigation and report back to council. I presume that they would do their due diligence and investigate all the people who were involved at the incident, the alderman or alderwoman that was involved in the incident, and report their findings. So,
Ms. Rolfs.
I think it's pretty clear that there is some language that needs to be adjusted to make this seem more professional in certain ways. At this point, then, would it be most appropriate to send it back to committee? And if so, then John, how would we appropriate do that? Or just go ahead and pass it or not pass it and say it needs to be amended?
well, if the idea being is that you're going to pass it and then immediately turn around and amend it, it's literally the next cow and then the next voting, I probably would counsel us to not pass it this time. Now, if you're not going to amend it 6 months from now, then I would say go ahead and pass it at this point. But I do not have a crystal ball as to what the appetite of the council is to amend it after this point. I will note, though, Ms. Rolfs, and I did raise my hand, Mayor, to talk, but
Yeah, I recognize that.
there is a few items just to give some context to the council. An alderman is written in state statute, and I tried to tailor this a little bit in accordance with state statute. The state statute says that if you do not show up, if you consistently do not show up for meetings, then that you have abandoned your office, and therefore there is a vacancy. If you owe a debt to the city, and that's something other than a normal utility debt, and you do not pay that debt, then that creates a vacancy. So those things I put within there, those are in regards, or should be more reflective of the vacancy aspects that already exist within the state statute. The aspect in E about that's already in place, in one individual alderman or alderwoman is not the boss, of any of the city departments or anything of that nature. The same way a individual alderman or alderwoman cannot bind the city. They can't just go out and contract on behalf of the city because they do not have the authority. The body as a whole has that authority. The individual does not. So, and that's just in essence reflective. I'm putting it just in what's already in existence there, in paper.
Mr. Eimer.
I agree. I mean, you don't go out to job sites and cause problems and disrupt and throw orders. No, I agree with that. But I think this council has forgotten its role of a little bit, in my opinion, of what an alderman is. I mean, when you got constituents calling you out to a problem, and maybe the crew is there at the time, that's our job, folks. Our job is to go out and every now and again maybe check on things and just observe. I'm not saying get involved. There's nothing wrong with going out and observing. That's our role as aldermen. That's the way it always has been till now. And I'm not saying go out there and you give department heads orders. I've never said that at all. Not at all. But to observe job sites or to observe departments and all, we're in charge of the funding of these things. So what is so wrong in going out and saying, "Oh, that looks nice," or maybe I have concerns, and then you take them concerns back to who they need to go back to. You don't need to discuss them with the employees out there. I agree with that. But that's our job, to observe all the things that are going on with our departments, our department heads, everything in this town. Ride around and watch things and see what's going on. That's what the people want. That's what they want, us involved. Instead of just coming up here, I mean, are we going to be the aldermen that come up here and just vote yes or no? Is that what our job is? Make sure we show up so we're not missing attendance, and then we just come up here and vote yes or no and stuff like that, and that's it? That's not our job, folks. That's not it at all. That's not what the people put us in here for. We're past aldermen in the past. We had committees at one time. They were heavily involved. Ms. Ross, you know this, involved with department heads. It kept things in check. And we've seen, without the committees, that some things have gotten out of check. We all know that. Ms. O'Donoghue brought some of that up last year. So, you know, that's, what is our role? I guess I should ask you, what is our role, and what is it the people want? If we have something in place, and if the people, we all live in this town, and you know as well as I do that if we're getting censured up here, or assisted order, or whatever he said, stop and assist, then the people are going to remove you. Face it, they're going to remove you. And you know it. We all know it. People are watching us all the time. And I can tell you what, from what I've heard, they're not happy with the direction of some of this especially. So you're talking about removing their vote, basically. It can be weaponized. It already has. And how you can vote for that is unbelievable. So that's my opinion.
Ms. McClellan.
I wondered if the city attorney had found any advice or counsel about what abandonment would, the time frame for abandonment, if there's a time frame that he would recommend, or.
It literally varies. It's very nebulous. If I was advising in any respect of the council, especially in regards to abandonment, I would be very leery, very wary before proceeding on abandonment, because the statute doesn't give a specified time frame. This here is trying an effort to give some sort of specified time frame, but again, I would be very hesitant because unexcused is it could be construed broadly. Okay, obviously we normal rational human beings would probably think, back when we were in school, what constitute unexcused versus excused absences. Okay, I'm sure we can all recollect those things. We all went to school, as I understand it. But be that as it may, when you tell you're going on a vacation, and usually the people you talk to is usually you're giving the mayor notification of what is excused and excused. I would always counsel those to be in writing, but if you're worried that it could be weaponized in one day, that if a mayor is adverse to a council member, that all of a sudden those excused absences become unexcused. I don't know what else to suggest besides just come to the meetings, and be a part of the procedure that you were elected to be a part of. Because as it's being bandied about, we're elected officials. Don't take away the vote from the people. Well, the people elected you to vote here for the respective interests of the respective wards. So that is a necessary procedure to be here in order to effectuate that. Like I said, the only way I would really, if the council came, be like, John, please give us some direction. Is this person, can we quote unquote get rid of him, because he's been here not too long. I was like, I would only do so proceed with a court order. There's in no way would I say to the council that you guys just make a decision to get rid of somebody and just vote on it and be gone with it because they haven't been here enough. I would probably apply for a court order effect to state that. So because as it's been that just invites a lawsuit. If the council votes to remove somebody based on abandonment, and that alderman or alderwoman is very angry about that decision and initiates a lawsuit, you're subjecting yourself to liability. I would only recommend do it via court order.
Mr. Heimer.
This attendance thing, we haven't had a problem up here. Chuck, you've been up here a long time. Steve, Wanda, this hasn't been an issue. I know we keep bouncing around on that one. Folks, we have something in place. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, if something comes up down the road that we need to come back to this, we can do that. I mean, didn't we clearly say that we can come back to this at any given time? I mean, you're really opening a can of worms here with of how this can be used. So,
Mr. Parrott and then Mrs. Bateman.
Yeah, as I'm reading the 1610 here, were we also going to make this? 'Cause it seems like it's just reading for the older man and older woman.
You would have to come back at a later date and amend it to make it part of all respective all the elected officials.
Yeah, I'm out.
We tabled it we tabled it to add sections to all the elected officials, and then probably put it down in the boards and commissions section, because right now it's written underneath. This was my idea that I was kind of banding back and forth, is to move that under boards and commissions, because I think under 2.2 is currently vacant for boards and commissions. We could insert it there and put that respective commission there, and then put these ethics, if you so desire, maybe kind of copy and paste, like kind of make a boilerplate version of them, where they are applicable to every single one of them, and just kind of put them in each treasurer, mayor, city clerk, and alderman.
That's another reason. How do you vote yes when it's not even all the way in place? I mean, if you want to, down the road, revisit this and make some changes, obviously there's got to be some changes. I think we all do agree with that. Then so be it. But how you can vote yes on this tonight, it's just crazy to me. So, and I'm sure there's a lot of people watching thinking the same thing. So,
Mr. Oblett and then Ms. Bateman.
Some of the rules that are in place here are not as harsh as they are in some other areas. During research for this, I've seen municipalities where if you're not even present for one meeting, and this is still by state statute, still in the books. I don't think it's ever utilized, but they can send the sheriff out to get you and drag you in here. And then,
that'd be fun.
Yeah, and on the first violation of it, they can vote to remove you. Now, I don't know if those ever get used. Sometimes I believe these stipulations are put in place just for them by naturally being there, ward off the bad behavior. Because it's exactly, yes. So I don't know. If I was a betting man, I'd probably say that probably was never actually utilized, but it's still on their books. So,
Ms. Bateman.
I don't know if this answers something regarding the attendance. Since I am the person that marks your attendance, that's how you get paid. Every alderman gets to be gone 2 meetings and still get paid. Those are classified as per fiscal year. That's classified as an excused absence. Anything after that is an unexcused absence. So with that being said, you actually get to miss 12 meetings. That's 1 meeting a month. So I haven't missed 12 days in 5 years, just not showing up. So
Well, with that being said, Ms. Bateman, nobody's doing that, correct? Nobody's missing that kind of meetings.
not lately, no. Not lately.
Lately being
Past
in the
year
last
and
few years.
couple years. Yeah.
Couple years.
Mrs. Ross and then Mr. Conzo. I thought you had your hand up.
I did, but I didn't
The
hear
floor is
last
yours.
word.
The floor is yours.
I forgot what I was gonna say. No. Mr. Hoblet, because some of this gets crossed over. If I understand what you were saying, if we pass this tonight, then we could put it on the agenda next week to bring back an amendment to this.
Yes.
And then that amendment could be voted, or if it takes us 2 weeks or
Yes.
3 weeks to get this language the way it should be. And I would hope that it would be provided to the alder people, or even those who will be included in it, to have a say-so before it comes back as the amended document. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I was-
You could pass it tonight and then bring it back later to amend it, yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Reimer, and then Mr. Gonzo.
Do you realize if you pass this night, it's in effect? In effect. Now, that's not, and
What you're
then,
saying is if I came back the next week and said I want to amend that motion,
but it goes in effect tonight, correct?
If the
Okay,
council passes it.
as is, Ms. Ross. That's not worded right. So why wouldn't you amend it first?
well, I'm just trying.
And, yeah.
I thought Mr. Hoblet said that's what he thought we
Yeah,
should
but
do.
you should never, as a council, vote this in, and then we're gonna come back weeks later and change it. Change it, get it right if that's what you wanna do, and then you vote it in.
Well, I agree with that,
Yeah.
but that's not what I was understanding the attorney to say, and I'm trying to clarify that.
Mr. Gonzo.
Thank you, Mayor. I know a short time ago, Alderman Eimer brought up about missing meetings and whether we've had anybody do that. And City Clerk Bateman also mentioned that. And that hasn't been a problem in recent years. Going back, and I'm not going to mention names, we did have an alderman who missed an extremely great number of meetings, excessive amount of meetings. And he was defeated when he ran for re-election, so that problem took care of itself, and the people in his ward chose not to re-elect him. So I think that generally works as a remedy for that.
Yeah, the people will vote and take care of it. They will solve the problem.
And the other thing, just a procedural thing, if you want to rewrite it, then I'm not sure why those of you who oppose tabling it, why you were opposed to tabling it if your intention is to bring it back in a form that's more agreeable to everybody.
But if
Why I
you,
didn't table is because I'm against it all the way. We've got something in place. We don't need this. If it's not broke, don't fix it. We can get to this down the road if need be. It's not needed right now.
Okay. Okay.
Something needs to be done.
I think we've had enough discussion on the matter. Would everybody agree? Okay. Roll call, please.
Okay, just verify what they're voting on.
They're voting on the item as written on the agenda, I believe, because we didn't receive any request to amend. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Ms. McCullen?
No.
Mr. Parrott?
No.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mrs. Ross?
no,
Mrs. O'Donoghue?
Yes.
Mr. Eimer?
No.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
I have a conflict on this particular topic, and I will be abstaining. The motion dies.
Awesome. Back to no rules.
Okay, bear with me. Gotta get back to the agenda. Yeah, hold on 1 second. Okay. Okay, that brings us to item 6C, resolution of the City of Lincoln adopting civility pledge. This item was also tabled on October 7th, 2024.
Why do we need this? We don't have rules on the way we act now.
Is there a motion to remove it from the table?
I'll make the motion.
A second.
Alderman Eimer made the motion. Alderwoman Rolfs second to remove this item from the table. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donoghue?
Yes.
Mr. Eimer?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullen?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Alderman Bateman made the motion. Alderwoman McClellan second. Discussion? Alderman
Can
Eimer.
somebody explain exactly what is going to happen with this one? Is that John?
So there was some civility pledges that was generated earlier. This resolution would take all your civility pledges. It would be attached to the resolution if passed, and it would be a resolution on file. It has much less legs and teeth than an actual ordinance did, but it is a avenue that's being circulated amongst the Illinois Municipal League to many municipalities, because it turns out ethics is becoming a bigger problem throughout the municipalities due to some ne'er-do-well behavior of aldermen and alderwomen. And given the ordinance request that was given to me and the civility pledge that was generated earlier, I created this resolution as another means and an avenues for this council to outwardly show their commitment to being civil with the community and with each other. So that is where this comes from.
And is this something we have the choice to sign or not sign, correct?
If you don't sign it, if you pass it, I would hope that every civility pledge gets submitted and attached to it. Now, Mr. Eimer, are you saying as to whether or not I'm going to grab your hand and force your signature on a civility pledge? No, I am not.
Ms. McClellan.
I think one thing this does is it sets a standard. And so if you have any questions about what civil discourse or whatever it might be, then we can go back to the document and say, look, this is what we'd like to see. It doesn't have teeth. It just sets a standard that says this is what we think it ought to look like. So
Mr. Eimer.
I did not sign this before, but I'll meet this council halfway. If you want to pass this, I'll go ahead and sign one.
Ms. Bateman.
Question for Attorney Hoblet. So even though if they pass this, they still all have to sign the little piece of paper?
That's okay.
So this resolution doesn't overweigh, this resolution doesn't say this for everybody. So if they don't sign it, then they don't have to.
Right, but I would presume that at that point you would have all the civility pledges from the people who do. You would attach it to the resolution, put it within your book, within the city of Lincoln.
So is that something that every
And
new
by the way, I'm
alderman-
sorry, Ms. Bateman, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yes,
every new alderman that comes in would have to sign it?
I don't know about that one.
Well,
this is a
this
civility pledge.
resolution's passed, so
Yeah.
is it only for this council?
Probably, that's probably a good point. I would probably say that it probably should be. Yes, I didn't consider that, but yeah, it probably should be, as a new alderman coming in or alderwoman coming in, sign the civility pledge as well. Yes, but be that as it may, if an alderman or alderwoman does not sign a civility pledge, doesn't mean that if it doesn't give them carte blanche, with authority to act in a manner that's uncivil and reliable. Well, I never signed the pledge, so I don't have to act like a rational human being. Yeah. So they would still be bound by, the ethics that are inherently binding upon all council members. And keep in mind, even though you didn't pass your ordinance, you can still censure somebody. You could still do a cease and desist. You could still do all sorts of things. It's just that there's no commission. In fact, you could still have an unofficial a committee that does investigations, based upon this. So the city has had more than one.
Mr. Eimer.
Ms. Bateman, I believe that question would be pointed more towards me as far as, I think I'm the only one that has signed one. And if they want to pass this night, I'll sign it. I'll go ahead and then.
I actually don't know who has signed it.
I
It's
think,
all laying on
I'm the
everybody's
only
desk.
one.
I don't believe everybody has signed it.
Oh, okay, well, maybe
Yeah.
I'm not the only one, but if.
Yep.
Oh, you didn't sign one either? Oh, okay.
Yep.
I'm not the only one.
It's the same.
Yeah. This topic was brought up several months ago. I think Mr. Hoblet went to IML, and this must have been a topic of discussion at IML, which is why you brought that back to us for consideration. Is that accurate?
No, I made some inquiries. I was at IML.
Oh,
but
okay.
it wasn't like a discussion topic. Yeah.
Yep.
Is this the?
That's a copy of the civility pledge that the IML sent me many months ago that I shared with the council. And the council at the time, it was an option to sign it or not.
Quick question.
Mr.
For
Parrott.
for Peggy. Peggy, do you have copies of the ones that have been signed by any of us? That
They're all on, whoever signed them is on their desk. That's where.
Yeah. They were just left.
I guess where they're
They were just left on your desk as a basically.
I've
a
signed one,
symbol
but
that-
you should probably have copies, right? No, I do not. No, you should probably
Oh,
have
yeah.
copies,
Yeah.
right?
if this ordinance passes this evening. Okay. Is there further discussion on this topic? Okay, if there's no further discussion, roll call, please.
Mrs. McCollum?
I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm voting for right now.
Oh.
Thank you. Okay.
To approve this resolution as it's in your packet.
Perfect, thank you. Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mrs. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donoghue?
Yes.
Mr. Eimer?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
And I just found this on the desk. It's a supplement to the pledge itself, which it sounds like it would be appropriate. So, however you want to proceed with that, I'll give you that as well. Okay, moving on to item 7A, approval of bid from Jaren Industries for the demolition of property at 129 South Sangamon Street in an amount not to exceed $210,000.
Make the motion to approve.
Second.
Alderman Eimer made the motion, Alderwoman Rolfs second. Discussion? Alderman Bateman.
Let's just say this has to be done, but I'm suggesting to the council and the city attorney that due to ungodly number of comments on social media, that the city take every avenue it has at its disposal to recoup this fund from the owner of that property.
Alderman Eimer.
I did want to kind of get something on record, and I don't know if Wes can answer this or not. I've had some people say to me that there is a possibility that the owner has some form of demolition policy, possibly from the bank, that they're not giving him an answer on. I don't know what's
The only
true.
policy I'm aware of for sure is a forced policy on the mortgage by the bank, which covers their interest on the note.
So you haven't heard no more comments about that being
I've
covered?
got a, I'm not sure what the form is called, it's a demolition form that an insurance company sends you saying what the city is owed. If anything, if you were to demo your house tomorrow after a fire, say, they would send that to me. They would not provide you any money unless we're taken care of first. Now, in normal cases, that number's zero. In this case, I went ahead and put 210,000 and sent it back. Only anticipation of this. So that's
You're
the
not
number
for
I-
sure if there's
No, I'm not.
anything coming out of the, because that's what was told to me. I'm like, I don't know if that's true, and I didn't sound right. So I just wanted to ask that
No, I'm not.
maybe you might know that that some of the money was going to be recouped. And supposedly the statement was the bank is not giving him the information to.
All I can do is talk to the bank and ask the bank and that's the answer they gave me. So no, I'm not for sure of any money
We're on the
coming.
hook for now.
As far as I know, correct, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Eimer?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullen?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Okay, next item up is item 8A, City Treasurer's Report for September 2024. Treasurer Conzo.
Thank you, Mayor. You've all received written copies of this report, and I'm going to describe a couple of things here that probably be of interest. If you were here a month ago, you saw, and even if you weren't, you'll see it on the report. Our general fund, as of last month, and with that I included the CDs that we took out during the month of August, we had a balance of about little over 4.5 million, which was, much better than it was a year ago at 4.2 million. And then I looked at the report that we had as of the end of September, and you see there we're down from where we were, and we're down considerably from where we were a year ago. And I thought, well, I better look into this, see why that is. And part of the reason for that is we had received a payment that for $269,907 from the sales tax, state sales tax, which had been for a previous month that was either lost in the mail or for some reason was never received. So they issued another check, and that was received at that time as opposed to being received 2 months earlier when it should have been. The other thing that happened in that month, two things. We got the SRO contribution, which was $40,000. A lot of that, there's no set time which that we know that that's going to appear. It just so happened that it did occur in September of 2023. Was not received in September of 2024. And then we had another $171,000 from a property tax distribution in September of last year, which I'm assuming we're going to get this month or at the latest in November. So you take all of that out, it's not near as far off as you would expect there, but it does reflect that we're not seeing a substantial growth in our general fund, and we need to work on that because we're about halfway to where we should be with that. You see the sources there that were distributed by the state, and they're covered on all the attachments, as well as where we are with the pension funds. Let me talk just briefly about the sales tax, municipal sales tax, and the state use tax. There you see we were up over where we were a year ago, down from last month, but still up from where we were a year ago. And that's for the year. A year ago, we're 1,847,000. So we're up substantially there. This one, a little different, and I'm not sure what happened there, but the non-home rule sales tax, we're down from where we were last month and where we were a month ago. We're still ahead for the year by about $12,000, but that's a little disturbing to see that number fall off. We'll see, and it could be a collection problem too. The Department of Revenue, this does happen from time to time, the collection and distribution. So we're going to have to keep a close eye on that. There you see where state income tax down slightly from where we were, but year to date, we are over by about $100,000. It just, a lot of that has to do with when people file quarterly returns and things of that sort. Motor fuel, interestingly enough, with all the extra taxes on it, the basic motor fuel tax that we've had for years, year to date we're at $194,000. A year ago we were at $198,586. So we're up a little bit there, and that extra distribution that we get from the as a result of the increase in the tax, we've got $190,000 this year as opposed to $177,000 last year. Why? Because the motor fuel tax law that was enacted has an annual increase in it. So it's not because they're pumping more gasoline, it's because they're taxing it more, which I think reduces, in the long run, reduces what we'll get in the motor fuel tax, because as you tax it more, people can afford gas less than they could before. If people live along the state line, and we're as far from the state line as just any county in the state, really. But people who live along the state lines a lot of time will go into Indiana, Missouri, and the other states to buy gasoline when this kind of thing happens. Video gaming tax, you see there, it was a little higher than it was a year ago, and year to date we're about 5,000, almost exactly 5,000 ahead of where we were a year ago. And that's all I have unless there are any questions.
I don't have a question about this necessarily, but could I ask you about the grocery tax? When do we need to be talking about that? What are the dates on that?
The dates on that, I believe, for replacing that is October of 2025. Isn't that correct, Mr. City Attorney?
To pass the ordinance, in order to ensure that your grocery tax remains in place, it needs to be passed by and given to the Illinois Department of Revenue by October 1st. So you would need a 2025. So you'd have to pass it well in advance in at least by early September. So because it has to be in the hands of the Illinois Department of Revenue by October 1st, and that's to ensure that the grocery tax remains in place come January 1st, 2026.
While we're on that subject, that amount it took me a while to find this out, but the Municipal League was able to gather some information on it for us. That's about $525,000 a year. So it's a substantial amount of money.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Conzo? Ms. McClellan?
And that was a 1%, right?
Yes.
1%.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Conzo. Okay, next up is item 8B, City Clerk's Report for September 2024. Ms. Bateman.
In the month of September, we received $357,549.18 of sewer receipts, which $25,223.10 were from the prison, one of the prisons.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Bateman? Okay. Next up is item 8C, Department Head Reports for September 2024. Those are either on file on the city website or will be shortly. Okay, moving on to item 9A, Approval of Sewer Department M&R reconciliation for fiscal year 2023-2024 in an amount not to exceed $19,015.75.
Move to approve.
Second.
Alderman Bateman made the motion. Alderman Parrott second. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mrs. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donoghue?
Yes.
Mr. Eimer?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mrs. McClellan?
Yes.
Okay, next item is 9B, approval of the expenditure of an amount not to exceed $32,000 for design and engineering costs for a community pavilion at the 8th Street Park.
Second.
Alderwoman O'Donoghue made the motion. Alderman Sanders second. Discussion? Alderman Bateman.
I just want to clarify because I had a couple people ask me, this is not approving a pavilion at 8th Street Park. This is approving $32,000 to design one for 8th Street Park. So by passing this, that doesn't mean we're automatically going to build one. There's no way we could build one for that kind of money to begin with. But it's for the design work, no different than what we do for streets and stuff and other engineering costs.
Ms. Rolfs.
Yeah, it may be no difference, but I've had people ask me some questions too. So I did a little bit of research. I looked at my tax bill for 2024. My Lincoln Park, which is the Park and Recreation tax, was $318.04. So we have one avenue that is actually an official, I think, government body or whatever they classify as a group of people that tax us for park. I know that's not part of it, but it's in there. I looked at what we did in April of this year, which was an agreement with the park district. And in that, they mentioned that there are several parks. The Exchange Park Lynn and Fink, not ours. Mayfair Park, Melrose Park, ours. Memorial Park, not ours. Postville Park and Ray White Park, ours. So there are 4 parks in there that basically we are part of. In that agreement, this is what we agreed to. The city will replace picnic tables and benches. The city shall be responsible for ordering mulch and city parks as well as costs and spreading the mulch. The city will be responsible for all tree trimming and tree and stump removal. The city will order and provide new trees in city parks and for planting trees in the city parks. The city shall continue to pay the electrical costs for the city parks, and the city shall maintain commercial general liability coverage. So we have already committed, I don't know how much money, I don't know what it would be, I don't know if we've, I did send the treasurer a note to see if any of these has cost us money at this point, and he didn't have time to finish it up. So I'm hoping to get that information back to him. So as I look at what could be unexpected, we don't know. We don't know when we're going to have to replace trees. We don't know when we're going to have to replace picnic tables. But we're talking again about parks. Well, on top of that park, of course, we know there's Scully that's the county, and there's Latham that's the county, and there's other parks that belong to churches and this, that, and the other. So the only other park that's not mentioned on this, and I guess we technically call it the 8th Street Park?
It's a park by ordinance. It is an actual park by ordinance.
By ordinance. And so that is not mentioned anything that they have, but for us, then we have that 5th park that we have to take care of. Do we have a budget? Do we have any kind of inclination that we're going to have a budget in case something comes up and we do have to spend the money? Or where do we take that money currently from?
The treasurer, Mr. Landers, can speak to it. It's in their budget.
Okay.
So some of those things that you listed there are just as needed, so that we've not spent any money on any of those. The mulch, in past, we've shared the cost with the park district to mulch those playground areas. But now that those playground areas were new, that we built, that we put together, so we're responsible for putting mulch in those, which generally is about every 2 years. We have to add mulch to those. As far as the picnic tables and things like that, as the park district's tables and things like that diminish or become unusable, then we will replace them with ours. So it's a list of stuff that basically an agreement that as we go, then we will take that over. As far as where these funds come from, it comes out of our general, it'll come out of our supply material budget. A lot of the work that's been done with the dog park, all the playground, all those other things has been with ARPA money. But it's not separated. As far as the maintenance and those other items, it's not separated in our budget. As far as maintenance like mowing and things like that. The park district still mows the 4 parks. They take care of groundskeeping, picking up the limbs and things like that. The only part that we do is like if a tree has a hanging limb or if there's a tree that needs to be removed, and then we would do that work because they don't have the capabilities to do that.
But I wonder if we look at the future, and we know if we spend the $32,000 now, and we're looking at discussing what we're going to put in there as a pavilion. And I have had people that have questioned me, what are you spending $32,000 to do a design for? Well, as we know, as Ashley told us, apparently that's the only way. Although I do think that last week you brought up a question, are there grants out there that we can get that doesn't require a down payment from the city to do? So I think that as a council, maybe when we look at what we're going to do in the spring as far as budgets, we look at should we have, to be financially responsible, a line item for parks. If we've got 5 parks that really are our responsibility, then...
Mr. Eimer.
Now, this A Street Park, is that solely gonna be ours? The Park District's not involved, right? Am I understanding that right?
Well, I think they provide mowing services, but it's our park.
No, we mow it, I think.
You know, the street department takes full care of that park.
So this.
Why did we not bundle that in with the other parks?
Because the other, where there's an old ordinance that was back in the 60s, where the maintenance agreement was in that ordinance, and they've been mowing and maintaining those parks ever since. So they mow the 4 parks. They mow Mayfair, they mow Ray White, Melrose, and Postville. They do all the grounds maintenance and mowing in those parks.
But not 8th Street.
But not 8th Street.
Okay.
I guess my next question is just for Chuck. Where are we getting the 32,000 from again? I mean, and is this also going towards Ashley, what Ashley needs to do for grants? Or is this just the design?
It's the design which she needs to position herself to be able to apply for grants.
If we do this, she can apply for the grants also, correct?
She can apply for grants that become available for that specific type of structure.
And we have the money, I assume, Chuck, for this?
Yeah, this is a general fund expenditure that we've included in the budget and in the appropriation. Actually, in the appropriation, it was not in the original budget. So, when we do the next budget amendment, that will be included in that. But it is in the appropriation ordinance. Also, I was going to say with some of the things that Alderman Rolfs talked about, some of those it's very hard to delineate exactly how much mulch went into this park and how much went into that park, as you know. Yeah. And as you know, Superintendent Landers, it's a difficult thing to track. So I don't know that having, separate lines for mulch for this park and for that park is even feasible, much less worth the time to do it. The other thing, there's a street department oversees this, and they know what they're doing, and they know, where they need mulch and things of this sort. The other thing with the dog park, which I think was another thing, Alderwoman Rolfs, that you asked about in your email, that the equipment for that was paid for with ARPA funds. That was and if you read the payment of bills when those come out, you'll see where a lot of these things were paid for, and because the invoices with the payment of bills describe those. Of course, you're always welcome to come in and look at those invoices.
Yeah, and I will share this with the council. I went to last week Senator Turner's breakfast with the mayors, and it was up in Clinton. There's probably 15 other mayors up there from throughout her district. This topic actually came up, not a pavilion, but grants, design, and stuff like that. So what you're being asked to approve here is very common, and one of the benefits of it is that there are very small windows with grants sometimes. When they come up, it could be like we're sitting here in October and they go by December 1st, you have to have applied for the grant. It's not possible to go through all the design work in that short window. So this work we're doing up front actually gets us ready so that if Ashley sees grants that are available or we see one and ask her to look into it, then she's like, I think that the pavilion would qualify for that. We've already got the design work, and it makes it easy for her to submit the grants. So it is asking to put the money up front. Yes, that's true. But it's not uncommon, and there were various other uses that other mayors talked about, specifically in McLean County. So I just wanted to share that with you. Mr. Parrott?
If I'm remembering correctly, I'm not. I believe Alderman Hopeful at the time was in discussion with the Park District, or the Park District came here and actually asked us to kind of tear up that ordinance, right, and get rid of it, so that the city was going to take back over all of the parks that were the city's.
Well,
it was the other way around. They wanted control of. They wanted us to give them all our parks, so then they could apply for grants. Because I sat in that meeting with Mr. Hopeful. They wanted us to turn over all the property to the Park District so that then they could utilize, I think it was for acreage or something. They had to
it was
have
an
so many-
OSLED grant, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they had to have so many square feet, acreage, whatever, and they didn't. So they wanted us to turn over all the parks to them, so then they could apply for a grant. And we just didn't feel at the time that it was appropriate for the city of Lincoln to give up all of our parks. None of them would be city parks at that point.
So that then became the trigger for what we now know as our park redesigns. I mean, coming out of those meetings, it was, yes, they're right, what they're telling us. Because if you remember, I think Becky Straight came and gave us a presentation also.
Right.
And the message coming out of it was, we haven't done a very good job of maintaining our parks over the years. And we probably do need to start doing a better job of that. So I think, yes, there was discussion about that old ordinance, but the agreement and the conversations that went into that were to try to preserve some of that past history and relationship that we had with the park district, because we wanted to make sure we maintain that relationship as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Landers?
Yes, and the agreement that Mrs. Rolfs is referring to was a product of that. So there was a black and white, who's responsible for what, and that's the reason that document came about. So we sat down with the park district staff, and Mr. Hofel was involved in it at the beginning, and then that's where that agreement came from that Mrs. Rolfs refers to.
And that agreement was April of this year, so it was done pretty much before we have budget, well, right as we ended budget discussions. And I'm just saying, you know, and the treasurer just said something about the general fund. I do think we need to be cautious about our general fund, and it's not just, here, this is my cash I can just take out and use. And if we're going to concentrate on parks, whether it's by doing improvements, doing labor, whatever, maybe we need to look at what do we need as budget items. I mean, what would happen if we did get the pavilion? Then is there more maintenance that needs to be done? Should we possibly have a budget line item and what we think we can feasibly spend out of the general fund on that? That's the place only we can get it.
I mean,
Or are we going to take his motor fuel tax to do
no, I mean, you're not wrong. We were very fortunate that we had the ARPA funds that enabled us to rebuild our parks, and the feedback from the community is that they love the improvements. Even during movie night last Friday, there was people in the dog park with their dogs while people were at movie night. So people are starting to use that park, and perhaps that's something we do need to do. Maybe we need to be more specific about budgeting for parks overall. I don't think it's a terrible idea.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to have a good one now and then.
Okay. Other discussion on this item? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullen? Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mrs. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donoghue?
Yes.
Mr. Eimer? Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Okay, next item up is 9C, approval of proposed additional target improvements to Stall Hut Drive, Malloris Drive, and Taylor Court at a cost not to exceed $400,000 from the Rebuild Illinois and MFT funds.
Second.
Alderwoman O'Donoghue made the motion. Alderman Sanders second. Discussion? Mr. Bateman.
So I would like to table this item. After some comments from people, I went out and drove those streets several times this weekend. I'm not disagreeing that they need some maintenance, but the comments that were received were there's city streets that are in far worse shape than these three streets. I understand that they're heavy trafficked. I understand, all the aspects of it. So I reached out to Shane and Walt from CMT in an email of two things. A, if we tabled it, what is the timeline to get some additional targets in a more residential area than a commercial area? And two, can this be done? The answers I got was, yes, we could table it, but we would have to bring it back on the next COW and vote on it on the next voting session. If we don't, then we don't have enough time to do the what it takes for IDOT to approve these. So all I'm asking is that we table it for one more, what was said in the email, one more round of city council meetings to see if there's any additional targets that could be brought forward that would meet the needs, and some of the needs in a discussion, a phone call with Shane and Christy from CMT, were some of the needs that would help speed this up is if the street has already had the ADA compliance done on the sidewalks and on both ends, we wouldn't have to add that in, and a couple other things. They can touch on those topics. I'm just saying there's some people out there, and let's face it, the city streets in our neighborhoods are deplorable. As one person said, I can drive those 3 streets holding a scalding cup of coffee in my hand and not spill any. I can't do that on the street I live on. So I'm just asking to delay this one round of meetings to see if they come up with any additional targets that would be in a more residential area than a commercial area.
Mr. Reimer?
You know, I think I'm gonna have to agree with Mr. Bateman as far as I think we need more residential. I'm not. He's right. The roads out there are difficult. They're bad, but we all know some city streets that are far worse. And I'm inclined to agree with him on tabling it, and let's go after our wards and try to, you know, that'll at least help keep some of the people happy. I mean, we can't do it all. We can't do it all, but you know, I mean, you're not going to get everybody happy, but maybe we show a little bit more of attempt to do the neighborhoods would be a good idea.
Ms. O'Donoghue?
Sorry, David, that your ward is not important at this point in time.
Walmart vote for you?
I think that we've just, for me, we've sat here and I don't know how many times we have discussed road construction, and this is what we've said. Well, we got to get on this. We got to get on this. It's coming winter. We got to get this work done. And now here we are. We're at the final minute, literally the final minute, 2 hours before the meeting, and it's up. Let's put a brakes on it. Let's not do this. The roads are bad. I've driven the roads. I know the roads are bad. And they're roads that people use every day. I mean, I go to Walmart probably 4 times a week. Those roads have not been redone. And yes, they may be some of the nicer roads that we have, but they're dilapidating also. So, I mean, reading this, so let's see. They're going to continue to deteriorate. The joints are bad. We're coming up on winter. So they're going to continue to deteriorate. So why wouldn't we do it now when these are roads that we don't have to do any concrete work to the sidewalks? We don't have to do anything because it's already been done. I mean, we can use the money for the road and we don't have to be doing anything else. So for me, I would go with what we've got here.
Ms. Rolfs?
Oh.
Floor is yours
You
again.
say that and then you look the other direction. I thought you were talking to.
Well, I was acknowledging you, and then I thought I saw a hand
Oh,
over here, so
okay.
the floor is yours.
Well, I went out there, and the road right in front of FedEx is horrible. But that's a lot like some of the roads here in town. And I do feel from driving those roads out there aren't nearly as bad as some of the people that are in the residential areas. And what I guess my question would be is, do we stay with the same number, 3 roads, or do we just take the distance that you have and find some streets that you can only do 2 of them?
Well, it's
I'm not
just
sure how that works for you, Walt.
there's so many variables in that depending on what we have to do as far as concrete and sidewalk ramp work. So that was one of the reasons why I chose those targets, and I stand by those targets because they're not going to get any cheaper to get done. And this is an opportunity for us to knock out some streets now that are heavily traveled by many people in the city. And then to another point is our projects that are currently going on are targeting streets in the neighborhoods. So we also have our other resurfacing going on, which is targeting those streets. But it would just depend on, if we chose other targets, it would depend on you know, how much ramp work and curb work we'd have to do in those areas, on how far we could get.
How do we go about prioritizing which streets get this work done? Because, you know, I go down 4th Street, 7th Street, some of those streets are just.
So there's a couple things that you got to think of. So we're required to do certain things with this money. So oil and chip is not maintenance. Oil and chip is a maintenance. So that's not acceptable with these funds. This is a reconstruction or overlay paving, those types of treatments. So if you have an oil and chip street, there's not much we can do with that with these funds unless we do an oil and chip project, which I don't think that's what we want to do at this point. We basically is just looking at the streets and prioritizing them as we go, and basically that's been left up to me. And those targets I bring forward to CMT, they look at them, they provide the estimates, and that's where we move forward from. So there's like the roads out there, and you mentioned FedEx, that's not one of the streets that's included.
But it's a mess.
That's a concrete street, yes. That's part of like when we did Heitman Drive with the Rebuild Illinois money a few years ago, that section between the truck stop and the candy store. All these streets that are included here, these targets that I've provided, are all asphalt. So if you go take a look at them, or if someone would like to go out there with me, I can point out why those targets were chosen. And it's given us an opportunity to knock out a lot of pavement without any extra cost with the concrete in one big project.
Okay, couple things that hasn't been mentioned, and I had a conversation with Christy today as well. Something that the council needs to keep in mind, and Shane can keep me honest, but there was a timeline document that was shared by email today. And regardless of whether you accept these targets that have been presented to you, or you do as Mr. Bateman suggests and table it to get additional targets, these targets will not be actually worked on for 6 months. We will be all the way into May of next year. Also, something to think about, if you go beyond November 18th, we run the risk of losing the funds for these additional targets. The money has to be spent and used by a certain timeline. So if you would like to suggest other targets, council's well within their right to do so. Just know that we're on a little bit of a timeline and we're already not going to see this work until next year. One other thing, and then I'll give you the floor, Mr. Bateman. Part of my conversation with Christy was also about how we avoid being always in a time crunch, I think as Ms. O'Donohue had made mention. So we used to have a program, and I know Mr. Bateman knows more about this, and I think Mr. Parrott was here when we talked about it before, but we used to have a program called Paver. And Paver is a system that they do an on-the-ground assessment of every road in the city of Lincoln. It gets put into a database, and it takes into consideration the age, the materials, a number of other factors. It gives us road target suggestions based on actual data about the roads. It takes the feeling and emotion out of it and tells us the roads that need the most attention. Christy, I made a suggestion and Christy said that's not a bad idea. I'll give it to you and the council can do what you want with it. Perhaps we need to bring back Paver and budget for it. We need to do a new assessment of our roads, and then we need to take that information and build a 2 to 3 year plan based on the targets, keeping in mind that the targets can still adjust, but it would help us if we had a 3-year plan laid out on roads so that the gentlemen who are working with IDOT and trying to get things scheduled and get bids actually have targets that they know are locked down and they don't have to wait every year for them. If we can get in that kind of cycle, then about halfway through a 2-year plan, they can start working on the next 2 or the 3-year plan. So we're always years ahead, which, if I'm not mistaken, that's been a sentiment of the council for a while now, is we're behind and we need to start getting better at planning and preparing. So
Is that still $25,000? Because it was when it first came out, but I doubt that they.
that I don't know. I asked Christy that and she said she would have to get back with me on what that would cost. Yeah, but there was 2 different systems too.
Oh, I
Pacer.
sat through a lot of those with Clay Johnson.
And regardless of which system we go with, my point is that we need to start planning and being better at it.
I
And
thought
that,
we were, I thought we were still using that. We're not.
well, I don't want to speak for Mr. Landers. I think we do to some degree,
We
but
still use the data
Thought
from that
so.
report, yes.
yeah, but it hasn't been refreshed in a while, correct?
Correct. I mean, if you, that report came out in 2017.
Yeah.
So that's how old it is. But we know if we have not worked on that street, you know, since that, if we have not done any repairs to that street since then, we know it's either at that pavement rating or below. It's deteriorated more.
Yeah, I don't think it would be a terrible thing to get some fresh data on current status, though. And I think that's the gist of what I'm recommending to the council, not for a decision tonight, but just food for thought. Mr. Bateman?
So I'm not disagreeing with Mrs. O'Donohue, even though she kind of made it sound like I was. We are under a timeline, but I also don't like the fact that I was given 3 targets last week and I'm supposed to go look at them, vote on them this week. That's exactly what I did. I got 3 targets last week. I went and looked at them. I don't really agree. So that's why I spent the time, instead of sitting here filibustering and all that other crap, I reached out to the people who make those decisions and said, A, what is the timeline? Can we make this happen? The answers I got was yes. Yes, we can table it one more week, or we're off next week, correct?
No.
All right. So we table it till next cow, and we have to vote on it at the next voting meeting.
I think Shane's trying to tell us
I'm
he'd like to speak.
Not gonna
Yeah.
push it past that. But I would like, and my constituents would like, a couple other options. We weren't given any options. We were told, these are what we're gonna do. At least with the wards, we put it out there. We have a couple of discussions. We agree or disagree. We try to spread it around in each ward. I just think that's the right thing to do. I hate to say it. These roads are heavily traveled. These roads do show signs of wear. But one of the issues I brought up today was they're heavily traveled and they're deteriorating because we're not taking into account that all the semis that go in and out of Walmart on a daily basis. If that's the case, we just did out by the truck stop in concrete, because when a 80,000 pound truck puts on its brakes, I don't care what kind of pavement it is, if it's not concrete, it's going to alligator. And alligator is those cracks you see at the intersections on asphalt. Those are caused by heavy trucks. So if we're going to do these 3 and we're going to make them last, I feel we need to do some engineering and get them to a place where we don't have to revisit them sooner than later. And also, the constituents would like some work done in the city.
Yeah.
Nobody even said where in the city. They just want to see, and I agree with Mrs. Rolfs, if we got to take this 400,000 and we only do 1 block, but we do 1 block of one really terrible street, then fine. I suggested downtown. The downtown square starting to grow and vitalize. The streets are terrible. They don't drain. There are divots. People trip and fall. We have to grind lumps down. All kinds of problems. Believe me, I know about foot traffic in the downtown area. So I'm just asking for 1 week. If the council doesn't want to table it, then I'm forced to vote for this. But I can tell you, I'm tired of daily, weekly, nightly getting phone calls about city streets. And if I can answer, yes, we're looking at all of them, fine. But soon as these came out, some people said Walmart should be forced to pay for them or whatever. Obviously, that can't happen. But when you drive these streets and then you drive down 4th Street or 7th Street or Delavan Street or any other street, kind of makes you think, yep, we need to look at some other streets.
Shane,
Even Union.
before you go, Mr. Eimer would like to speak.
And just real quick, I'm not a little bit on this paver thing. I think that was a wrong idea, paying $25,000, whatever it was, for that, for decision making. You know, and I got to go back to a little bit of the past. You know, aldermen used to be, and they've chose not to have committees, but that was one good thing about committees. Aldermen got with the department head and went out there, and we had some pretty smart aldermen at the time, and then Donnie Osborne was the superintendent. They made some real good decisions on, and for many years, it went really well like that. I'd like to see go back that way. I mean, I don't want to pay 25, 30, whatever it is for this paver thing decision. I don't think that's good. We got to make the decisions a better way than that. So that was my.
How do you expect two committee members who have no experience with roads to give advice to a department head? Because we're sitting here right now because the department head gave us recommendations and we didn't like them.
Well, back in the past, there was some aldermen up here that had experience.
Paver takes the good old boy club out of it also. You go by actual data. I'm not disagreeing with you, Mr. Eimer, but back when Mr. Osborne was street and alley superintendent, we didn't have such things as data. You just drove down the street and said, damn, that's bumpy. Now, I mean, I've talked to Shane several times on the clock and off the clock, just meeting him here in town. Every town has these kind of systems in place. Chatham's got an awesome one. They can tell you exactly what street they're going to get done and when. And that's why I mentioned at the last meeting, yes, I like the 3-year plan, 5-year plan. We should be talking about roads we're going to fix in 2026 right now, not the ones we're going to fix right after the first year.
Mr. Landers and then Shane.
I'd like to remind everybody that we didn't know that we were going to have additional funds available until those bids came out. So that's why this is short notice, because we had to provide different targets so we can make sure we get that money spent. And that's the reason why it's, this quick. So, and anytime you get feedback from a citizen that they're concerned, what their concerns are, a street that they're concerned about, please let me know. And I use that data or that information when we start compiling targets. I've offered before. I says, any alderman, you want to go on a drive through the ward? Let's go. We can hook up one evening or an afternoon and let's go drive through and look at things, look at issues. I'm more than willing to do that for sure. So even you, Craig, you betcha. So, and that gives me an opportunity to point things out to you that you're not aware of, just because you're not on the street every day and doing these tasks. So I would encourage anybody that wants to do that, please contact me. But again, if you're getting feedback from citizens, please share it with me, and I can use that information.
Shane.
Yeah, just a couple of points of clarification. The schedule that I developed today, I sat down with Kristen, who's so I'm really the liaison between our surface transportation group and the city, and that's part of my role here as the city engineer. I guess I don't have a horse in this race as far as I'm here to work for you guys. If it's these targets, great. If you want us to look at other targets, great. We'll do the work. One point of clarification was with the schedule I developed, it was actually the Cal meeting on November 12th is what we were targeting with that. And that's just the quick turnaround that Peggy would need. Basically, if we get different targets today, we'd be hard pressed to get good information back and ready to present, in an orderly fashion to Peggy on Thursday when she's putting her agenda together. Right. So the schedule I developed was targeting the 12th for the Cal. One of the things that we have to consider, and if you remember the two projects that were recently awarded, one was locally funded, one was rebuild funded. When we looked at the total list of targets, we actually separated those out based upon what fits more of the IDOT criteria and what fits the local funds. Basically, we have a little more leeway with the local funds. One of the criteria in IDOT's in their streamlined ESR, environmental survey request, is if there's any brick streets, like brick exposed. So any of the streets in those lists of targets that had exposed brick immediately went over to the local funds. If it didn't, then we take the none the wiser approach that we're not sure what's underneath there. IDOT doesn't make us do pavement cores, so those kind of stayed on that list. So those are things that we have to be cognizant of when we're developing the targets. As far as, how we move forward, there's a lot of talk about putting together a pavement management plan is really what it is. That's data-driven. The engineer in me loves that because it takes out the subjectivity. It's all objective at that point. And really the last comment on the streets out by Walmart, I remember a young whippersnapper when I started with CMT in 2003. That's when we were working on the plans for that store. So that's coming up on, by the time it got constructed, a 20-year life, which for an asphalt pavement is getting towards the end of its useful life. So, I mean, do that with you will. I mean, sometime in the near future, that'll have to be addressed as well. So.
Mr. Parrott?
Thank you for that additional information. I know that as all of us up here as aldermen, we have residents in our ward that, bring up issues about their streets, and obviously, and I think I've mentioned a couple of times, Park Place, like, the curbs, on it are horrible. Sidewalks in some locations are horrible. And obviously, we would like to see those issues taken care of. And in the last meeting, I was thinking to myself, and I shared this with Alderman Bateman, is man, I wish we would do more residential, in the city, because I think that's what our residents, say to us as well. And then I think back and I look at, Tremont Street, and Tremont's had some work done on it, spray patch or whatever it was, I don't know how many years ago. They sprayed something on it and then it wore off pretty quick. And it seemed like Tremont is addressed more often than other streets, in the city. It just seems like that to me. But I do understand more heavily traveled areas, whether it's these three locations here, sometimes impacts the rest of the citizens as well, too, for those that are using it. So I'm kind of torn on this a little bit. I could see it go either way. And I can see maybe getting more bang for the buck with what was listed here. So appreciate that. But I also know that we hear from our constituents, and we have to, fight for them as well, too. So I'm not in disagreement. We can look at them if we can on a timeline. If we can't, then I'm good with these here. But, we address streets for all of our residents. And I know that Tremont gets it because there's a lot of people that travel down that road. So I understand these as well.
That was because they shut off Pekin Street, when they closed that crossing down here, they all shifted to Tremont Street.
Mr. Eimer and then Mr. Bateman.
I agree with Steve. This is a tough one. I agree with Kevin that table ain't a bad idea, but I also agree with Ms. O'Donohue. I mean, we're running out of time. I agree with you, Shane. We are pressed for time. So we hear it from constituents is the problem. I think you can respect that as, now can we go ahead and just go along past this and get that done, and then hopefully our constituents are watching that they'll understand that, hey, we're on a time schedule. We're pressed for time. This was $400,000 extra, so that wasn't foreseen, so we're all under the gun on it. So as I said here, I don't know which way to vote. I mean, I'm like Steve. It's a tough one because I'd like to see more residentials done, and so I don't know. It's going to be a hard one.
Mr. Bateman.
So we've heard that we got the time. I'm just asking for a concerted effort to try to find some additional targets. If you can't find any, be honest and say there's none out there that fit. I'm not saying you would be dishonest. I'm just, saying give us your best choice of streets. I'm not against this. I just would like to see an alternative inside a residential area. If there isn't, I'm a yes vote. But tonight, I would like to table this until we can get maybe a few more targets found out. I understand the parameters. You put that very clearly in the email. And as long as we follow them, I'm okay. So,
If we table it, is it really jeopardized? I mean, let's say we went with his idea. Just say, is it jeopardizing work being done then, or
So,
do we have a week? I guess is my question.
so the timeline that I put together shows that we have the time.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I guess one of the things that we've discussed over the past several meetings is how long it's taken to get to this point, right? So really laying this out timelines, just again, kind of week by week, month by month, looking at how this approval would need to take place, you know, the funds have to be authorized by July 1, which means IDOT has to have everything signed off on. So that means we have to have it bid, we have to have the contract in place, and IDOT has to have that approved. So this is all contingent upon them approving in a timely manner, kind of like they did before. So we've got a few weeks of a buffer in there, and I think we might need that, given that I'm sure a lot of other communities are going to be rushing to spend the rest of their money. So we've got time, we just don't have time to kick it down the road and then kick it down the, you know, like, so. Okay.
Miss,
Peggy will have her information that she needs by the 12th, is that what you're saying?
mm-hmm.
So we'll get the information.
Miss
right.
Rolfs, I think Miss Rolfs had a question.
Yeah. You had alluded to the fact that Mrs. Bateman needed something by the 12th?
It would be on the 12th, Cal, so she puts the agenda together at the end of the week preceding that.
Yeah, and the reason the reason why I said the 18th earlier is because it doesn't matter what we talk about on a cow if it doesn't. That was the vote date.
That was the vote date
for the regular meeting. Mr. Sanders.
Okay, so this is in my ward, so obviously I'm gonna be a yes vote on this. It's the most heavily trafficked roads in my ward. And most of the residential roads in our ward need way more work done than overlay. They need curbs, sidewalks, a lot of engineering done on some of these roads. So I'm not gonna vote no on the most heavily trafficked roads in my ward. I'm just not.
So, Chief Meister.
Just wanted to offer some food for thought. In considering these targets, I don't know anything about fixing roads, building roads, any of that stuff, but I do know what these roads are used for. Stallhut Drive and Taylor Court are both used to access our hospital in both emergency and non-emergency situations, depending on which way you're coming from. And then Mallards Drive, obviously, everybody knows what that's used for, but not every citizen in the city of Lincoln travels Adams Street. Every citizen in the city of Lincoln travels Mallards Drive. So I just wanted to offer that for thought.
They get a lot of traffic from the nursing homes back there as well. Mr. Landers. And then Ms. Rolfs.
And with the extension of Taylor Court, the traffic has went up exponentially. People use it as a through street to get to Walmart or wherever they may go, or to the hospital, back and forth.
Ms. Rolfs.
You know, at least we can say one of the things that really balances this out is if this work is done now, they're not going to be on the list for next year. And we will have time, hopefully, to get the exact streets we need to have done in a priority way.
Well, next year's Tremont.
The whole year will be Tremont.
We
not
expended-
all funds are going to that, are they?
Well, I guess that's up to the council, but the Tremont reconstruction is roughly 1.6 million.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that stretching over 2 construction seasons. So,
So that will take all the funds.
we'll
Mr. Landers.
We'll design and do however big a program you guys want to do.
My hope is that we can still have some smaller projects alongside the Tremont Street project, whether that may be oil and chip and scarification and oil and chip, smaller projects where we would target certain streets along with that. That's my goal anyways. Maybe utilize some motor fuel tax money if it's available, and looking at those funds and looking at where our budget lays out with the Tremont Street project.
Mr. Eimer.
I got a question for Walt. Is it possible and is it feasible? Our crew used to oil and chip all the time. Is it feasible and save money for our crew to go back to assist it in this process to, we used to cover a lot of roads.
Yeah, I mean, and you know that things have changed a lot. We do a lot of other stuff. We have a lot of other responsibilities that we do, and then it would take a large investment in equipment.
Well, we have the chipper spreader still, right?
A 1970 model, or 1978 or 79, whatever model
But
it is.
if we got a good used one and rented an oil truck, we have the dump truck. I'm just trying to throw it out there. And
Yeah, my
maybe
opinion
we could
is,
target just so many of the neighborhoods on the oil and chip.
yeah, my opinion is that the contractors are much better at it than we are and more efficient and get it knocked out in a timely manner. That it would, it scares me to depend on the equipment we have. Because if you got a tanker or a truck full of oil sitting there and something breaks down, we would have to invest in equipment for sure. But I am pro contractor for that work myself.
Mr. Bateman.
So in the absence of time, let's just vote on these three and forget that I even brought up the fact that residential areas are important. The one thing I do want to bring up is citizens hate oil and chip. All that does is put lipstick on a pig. I remember running for office once in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and a gentleman stood on his front porch. We had a conversation. It rained earlier that day, and he pointed to a puddle in front of his house, and he says, "You know what I hate about oil and chip, Kevin?" I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "That puddle right there is the same puddle you rode your bike through when you were 5 years old. All you're doing is putting lipstick on a pig. Nobody ever addresses the dips, the divots, the cracks. You're just putting lipstick on a pig." So anytime we can get away from oil and chip, I am 100% in favor of that.
Mr.
That's
Eimer.
absolutely not true, because if the roads are prepped correctly, like I used to have to do back with Donnie Osborne, we go fill all the low spots and everything. I know from experience that is not true. And it does seal the roads, and it does make the roads last longer, so that's unfortunately.
Same puddles on DeBueller.
Then it wasn't dealt with.
That was there 40 years ago.
Well, and that's because it was not filled in. Believe me, I spent a day or hours and hours or a day on one block, leveling it off, and then we
That's-
sealed over it, and it worked.
Okay. Ms. Rolfs, did you have something?
No,
Okay.
I'm ready to go.
Okay. Roll call, please.
And we're voting what the
Roll-
agenda says.
We are voting on the item 9C as presented.
Mr. Sanders, Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullen?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mrs. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donoghue?
Yes.
Mr. Eimer?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Okay, that leads us up to announcements. Does anybody have an announcement they'd like to make? Mr. Eimer.
I was fortunate enough to go out to the new rock quarry today. I was just letting citizens know it is operational. We can get CA6, we can get dirt, and we can get fill sand. It's Sharif out of company that's doing it. Of course, it's going to keep growing. I don't know if a lot of people are not aware of it, but you are able to get some items, and it's cheaper than going to Indian Point. So I decided to pass that on to the citizens.
Mr. Bateman.
And Friday and Saturday night was the last 2 nights of the Lincoln Speedway. Very large crowds.
And they were very loud.
Not really, not as loud as
They
I've
were.
heard it before. But it was the season finale. Mrs. Bateman and I were there on Friday night. There was a very serious accident. A car actually got into the fence, and they spent, I'm going to guess, 30 minutes trying to fix the fence. But it was very exciting. Brought in a lot of people. It was shared on social media several times from Kenny Wallace, who was there this weekend, an ex-NASCAR driver. He actually won on Saturday night. So, again, it was a very successful season. Adam texted me today and thanked us for the cooperation. They're growing that racetrack and bringing in more and more people every year. I told Mr. Parrott I sat in line to get in on Friday night behind license plates from Minnesota, Iowa. Mrs. Bateman and I sat next to a couple from Meridosha that actually was spending the night in a hotel so they could watch both nights of racing. So it does bring a lot of people in. I know it is noisy for about 3 hours, but I wish, and Mr. Conzo can attest, there's no way of breaking down tax dollars per a hourly or daily rate to see what kind of money is brought in. But if you go across the street to Casey's, Dairy Queen, Cracker Barrel, Farm and Home, they'll tell you what kind of money it's brought into this city.
You know, when somebody says they're loud, that doesn't always mean they're being critical.
It's a good loud. It's a good smell.
Well, okay.
Yeah, that smelled real good.
It's just, it was really loud.
Okay, I wanted to thank Miss Metelko and Becky Straight from the Park District and Brian Clark for sponsoring movie night and making that happen. We probably had like 30 or so people out there. I know Miss O'Donohue came out. It got a little chilly there at the end. Some people were taking off early, but overall, it was a good event. Also, reminder, next week, our meeting starts an hour later. We have the dedication for the two Central Illinois Veterans Commission tiny homes up in Atlanta at 5:30. So if you can,
You have an address?
I want to say 104 East Street and 106 and Adams. It's
behind the big elevator.
and it's right behind the police station. Yep, they're the two brand new homes sitting there. I think Adams is one of the intersecting streets there as well. So if you can come, yeah, they're relatively easy to find. So that's all I have. Does anybody else have an announcement, Mr. Landers?
Just want to give everybody an update. The extended hours at the landfill will be starting on the 30th. It'll be open Wednesday through Sunday, 8 to 3:50. And then our first scheduled leaf collection, where we go drive around and pick up the bags, was November 6th.
Okay,
And there will be a press release coming out regarding that.
that
So
was gonna be my question. Okay, all right. Any other announcements? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Alderman Downs made the motion. Alderman Parrott second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Meeting is adjourned at 8:11 p.m.
Sam,
Bye, Andrew.
bring your thumb drive. Remember to bring it next week.